Hello, welcome back to the David Watson podcast. Every now and again, when I do these podcasts, I get to speak to somebody, and it reminds me just how vulnerable we can be when we're in love, and when it doesn't go the way our dreams had hoped. It's difficult. It's a difficult, clumsy way of describing it. So listen to the podcast because Alicia and I really get into what it's like to lose somebody you love. Hello again. Welcome to the David Watson podcast. Nice to meet you. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm very well. I'm very well. I am actually in between two laptops. I have a brand new laptop, and when I tried to set it up earlier, it didn't work properly, which is annoying because it worked for my last podcast. So I don't know what's happened between the two.
Yeah.
And as I'm not technical, I'll wait until the weekend and then phone my mate Carlton and get him to sort it out for me.
There
And,
you go.
but yeah, that's kind of what it is. Because I have all of this stuff, and if it doesn't switch on, I've no idea how to do anything with it.
Good old technology. It's fantastic, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It's perfect. I tell you what's perfect about it is this: is you and I can talk like we're in the same room.
Yeah, that's true.
That I love technology for that. But it's when I do something like record a podcast, a previous podcast, and then
Mhm.
go back onto this. I've not done anything other than switch the laptop on and off, which is
Yeah.
actually supposed to bring everything back to how it was. And then it's not working, and I'm just like, it's at that point I know I'm at the level of a Neanderthal and don't know what I'm doing.
I I find that with all new equipment.
Yeah,
Anything that I buy new, there is a troubleshooting process, no matter what. It's
yeah,
never plug in and it works ever. So I just always prepare myself now for having to spend at least an hour or two on troubleshooting it.
yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. That's what happens. So interestingly, when I do these podcasts, that it's like any story that you want the beginning, the middle, and the end sort of thing. And but one of the things that when I kind of first connected, the first thing that popped into my head is, where does the story actually start?
That's yeah, that's a great story. Or that's a great question. Oh my goodness. I have a new book that's coming out. It's an anthology where I'm one of like 18 or 19 authors in it. And I'm also a published author in another book that was an anthology. And I tell one piece of my story from when my wife died by suicide, from that moment moving forward. And in the new book, I was like, well, there's so many different pieces of my story, but where do I want to start it? So I'm glad you asked that. And I decided to start with um, a, a I don't want to say it wasn't an altercation. It was a day that my wife had a really was just on one of her lows,
Hmm.
mentally. And it happened in 2020. And I remember when this event took place going like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this side of her. She's really, really struggling. It was also the moment that I found out that she had self harmed for the first time that we were together. Um, and unfortunately, I feel like that was the first moment where I knew something was seriously wrong in terms of mental health and her mental health. And that kind of started a path of me really being able to dissect these events that would take place. And that when I say events, I mean when she was in her lows, because I believe that she had borderline personality disorder. And if you know anything about that, there's really high highs. You can be
Mm.
on top of the world, and in a moment, you can be at your lowest low mentally, where everything's just caving in. And her coping skills weren't exactly the most healthy. And that's when I really started to see it, that particular event, which I break down in the new book, um, the everything that happened in that moment. just, and it's just kind of my warning to people, like, here is a major red flag. If you think somebody's struggling, or you feel like somebody's struggling when it comes to mental health, here's not necessarily where I went wrong in her mental health journey, that, her suffering. But I want to say that I didn't take it as seriously as I should have. And it is one of my regrets. And that was just kind of the starting moment to all of the things.
How did you meet your wife?
So we actually met online. I was away for school for the military. I was gone for 4 months, and we met online when I had about 2.5 months left of school. And we met through Match.com. And
Shout out to Match.com.
yes, absolutely. And we started messaging through Match, and then it was email, then it was text, and then it was phone calls, and it was video chatting, and we just went on this journey of getting to know each other from afar. And it was great. It was perfect, for the just us two just getting to know each other for 2.5 months. And then when I flew back home, she picked me up from the airport, and that was the first time we met face to face, actually. And we were kind of inseparable from then on. We never skipped a day of talking to each other, even when I was deployed or at school or on a military contract. We talked from morning to night every day that we were together from the moment we met. Yeah.
So you said something that you mentioned a red flag, and you said you wish you'd taken it seriously.
Yeah.
Why do you think you're responsible?
Well, the empath in me will always feel some kind of responsibility.
For sure.
Because I wanted to protect her. Um, I wish I could have protected her more, and I did my best. I read books in those last 8 months that she was alive, and I figured out, like, wow, I'm pretty sure she has borderline personality disorder. I started reading the books and joining the support groups on how to better support her when she was in her lows, just to how to talk to her, validate her feelings, just to kind of help her out of those moments. I mean, I was her partner. We were each other's partner.
Yeah, of course.
And I'd never, if you would have told me 2 weeks, a month, a year before her taking her life that would have happened, I never would have believed you. I never would have even entertained the idea, because we were so connected and we were going to be together forever, no question. So I was her person. I also know how she operated, though. And even when I addressed my concerns to her, she didn't take them as seriously as I did. She would kind of blow off my concerns. And there's, in a lot of cases, somebody has to want to get help in order to get the help. You can only do but so much trying to convince.
Nothing works if somebody that doesn't want what you're offering.
Yeah.
No amount of persuasion, there's no level of coercion.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, they'll find a way to self-harm out of it.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And that goes with anything, whether it's addiction or I don't know, abusive relationship. I mean, somebody has to really have that desire to be out of that situation, and she suffered immensely for a while. I knew that she had a rough upbringing, childhood. I knew that she was struggling with a lot of things from a mental health perspective, and she was seeing a therapist. But when it came to her coping skills of misusing prescription medications alongside alcohol and stuff like that. Um, it was, I would address my concerns, and she just didn't see it because it's what she was always used to. And that was kind of her response, to be honest with you. It was a response was, well, I've done this for a long time. I'm fine. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Do you think she struggled
yeah.
with feeling loved?
Unloved,
No. Do you think she struggled with feeling loved?
loved. I, that's a complicated question.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. It's you mentioned childhood
That's why
trauma.
you asked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I've been in these situations. I do a lot of coaching and hypnosis and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And I will be upfront and honest. As much as I
Please do.
understand it, I don't understand
Hmm.
it. And all
Right.
I can give you is times I have seen people who have had very difficult upbringings, and they find
Mm.
themselves in an environment that literally, as a child, they'd have journaled about this would be the perfect life. And,
Right.
you know, regardless of whether they're a wife or a husband, um,
Mm.
that they're in, that they get married, that they have the perfect life, whatever that would be, however they would have
Hmm.
journaled that. It's almost like a synchronicity that they wrote it down once, and then the universe gives it to them. And they meet
Yeah.
this incredible person that they have this amazing connection with, and they're like, fuck, this is what being loved is. This is it. And
Yeah.
then you get the house. Before you know it, you get the dog, and it kind of
Mm.
goes on this kind of journey, and it's perfect. And they're
Yeah.
just like, no, I can't have that. I can't have that love. It's not who I am. And they reject
Yeah.
it.
I think that was towards the end. I think that's kind of what was going through her brain in a sense. She did write notes. She left notes for me,
Mm,
and you know, her interpretation was she was doing this for us.
yeah,
Kind of that approach to it, because she was suffering from her demons that she just couldn't get through. Um, we loved each other, and this is a part of the relationship that I've had to kind of not dissect but really analyze myself. Is we pretty much love bombed each other for 5 years
yeah,
straight, like that's the amount of love that we shared with each other. But personally speaking, coming from somebody who has abandonment issues and everything, of course you soak all that love in,
yeah.
but I've never loved myself. So we look for that external validation of love all the time, like,
I don't
please
think
give.
you can. I don't think you can. I think we innately as human beings not capable of possessing even a strong sense of pride. It's very difficult
Mhm,
as a human being to nurture a strong sense of pride in the way that I
mhm.
might meet you, see you achieve something, and as a friend, reach out and say, "Oh, well done! That was brilliant," and actually genuinely be really proud of you, like
Yeah.
just bursting with an emotion and an energy that tells you from the
Yeah.
heart, "I'm really proud of you." We
Mhm,
rarely ever have ever had. I can't think of a time I've ever really been able to look myself in the mirror and express that same sense of pride for myself that I would for you.
mhm.
And
Yep.
I just don't think so. I think when we meet somebody that we can express a love to,
Mhm.
and we kind of get a sense that they feel it the way that we're offering it,
Yeah.
and because of that, it kind of comes back in a reciprocated like feedback loop, just like
Mhm.
this is the best thing that ever existed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's strong and it's powerful.
Mm. But it's
Um,
a reflection from somebody else of how we want to feel, and it's kind
yeah.
of that affection is always held. The power of that affection always held in their hand, and they can kind of almost move you like a puppeteer. But it's because you're both giving it to each other. You're both kind of pulling strings in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And it felt that way. It felt that way. And that's where, we I felt such a strong connection with her because she would give me. And when she was in her lows, of course, she withdrew, you know, um, because that's what
Yeah.
borderline personalities do, they withdraw all of that from you. So it was like devastating for me as well in those moments, but at the same time I wanted to make sure she was okay. So there's just like really complicated aspects to being with a borderline personality disorder. But I realize now that that wasn't healthy. It wasn't
Mm.
healthy for me as a human being to rely on just the love that I was being given, when she was giving it, which was
Mm.
97% of the time in the 5 years that we were together. There was 3% of the time where she had her moments of lows. Like there
Yeah.
was less than a dozen times where she found herself in like just the pit of despair and just absolutely crumbling. But I realized after she passed, and having the worst event ever happen, having the worst abandonment that you can possibly think of, I've had to learn how to love myself,
Mm.
since then. Just doing the self-care techniques, talking to myself, saying exactly what you said, looking at myself in the
Yeah.
mirror and saying, like, you are worthy. I love you, telling yourself that,
Yeah. It's difficult.
that I love you in the mirror. Yeah. Yeah. It's, um, uh, yeah. I mean,
Because sometimes you say that, you might write down, and I tell people to journal to offload, but also to journal
mm,
positively and actually have. And I check myself a lot because sometimes I can get into such an argument in my head about
mm.
something I did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. It's just like, mate, I mean, the only thing you've gained in 30 years is weight. Don't worry about it. I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And it's just, but it, you can do, and as somebody that encourages that and promotes it, and I know the value of it, I know the real value. There's these moments when if you're not in that right space when you're trying to do it, it just becomes cynical, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work. It has the opposite effect. It's like you can't even have integrity about trying to be about being integrity. I mean, it's like, you're the biggest fraud out there. You're trying to big yourself up, telling you, and it's bullshit, and you don't mean a fucking word of it. Because you're just having a bad day, but you need to try and get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are those moments when you're like, and I struggle with that too. Like I can tell myself I'm loved and I'm worthy
Yeah,
and, all of these things. And deep down, I'm just like, what are you talking about? And those are the moments when I know that I need to sit with whatever it is that I'm
yeah,
feeling. And it's so important to feel all the feels. My method is meditation, guided meditation, and whatever I am feeling in that moment really comes out in that moment of meditation, whatever it is. And I have personally found so much healing in it. And I even listened to guided meditations of self-worth
yeah.
and confidence and all of those things. And personally speaking, it works for me.
But I
But
find
you're,
that's the one thing I actually find is the worst possible times when people can get into kind of get it wrong, for one of a better term. So I don't want it to sound too clumsy, but get it wrong when they're trying to discover how they want to get over grief and how they want to work through grief and the healing, is when they think there's a one solution fits all. And it's just like
yeah,
some days it's listening to music, some days it's going for a walk, some days
yep,
it's looking through old photos, some days
yep,
it's realizing that you haven't thought about it for a few hours and you've been completely distracted. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and at the end of that tunnel is the hope that you're looking for. But do you know what I mean? It's there isn't one solution, and I very much say it's like, layers of paint on an old door, or the onion or whatever. Because just when you
mhm,
think you've dealt with something, yeah, you've moved it from that surface, but now you're under
mhm,
the next coat of paint, the next layer, whatever way terminology works for you, and it's going to come up again because the root is
mhm,
deep and it's very much
yeah,
embedded in your soul, and it's in a painful place, and it can't. Sometimes I think what the body and the mind does is it can't expose you to it all at once, because
mhm,
you're not capable of processing it. You're not capable of dealing with it. So once you get over that initial shock, you kind of just get drip fed a type of misery until it's all solved.
Yep. And I've learned, I mean, I know more about myself than I ever have. Like the level of self-awareness that can come from trauma is just, um, it's almost overwhelming how
Mm,
much
yeah,
how
it's
much you start to learn about yourself. And one of the things that I have learned is just to kind of fall into whatever it is that I am feeling, or there are some days where, I mean, I love music. I've always loved music since I was a kid. And some days I can listen to music, and that's what I need in that moment to kind of bring me up. And then other days I'm like, I don't want to listen to music at all, and it might be something else. So there are different avenues that I take personally to help me through my healing journey. Because there isn't just a one time fix. I don't meditate every day. I probably should, but I don't meditate every day. But
no,
I
I don't.
know, yeah,
I'm
I
much
know that there are
more.
moments.
Yeah, my rituals, my sort of habits, routines, and rituals. It was a
Mm-hmm.
great benefit to me when I realised that they weren't supposed to be rigid. They're allowed to
Yeah.
be
Oh,
flexible.
yes.
So I don't have
Yeah.
to do this every single day. It's actually okay if I'm not in the mood for it. Do you know what? That's fine, David. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I've had to learn that the hard way too, where I'm like, you get on this health kick and you're like,
Oh yeah,
okay, I'm going to take my vitamins and I'm going to work out and I'm going to eat healthy. And you want to start this regimen, this like rigid regimen that you have in your brain that you're going to do every day. And it never works out that way. It never works out
no,
that
and
way.
then you can get caught up and watch that social media influencer who does it, and they're like, you see them day in day out. This is their routine. This is a routine, and you're like, damn, and you can look at them with real envy, and then
Yeah.
you'll start watching them on a podcast, and about 20 minutes in, you're like, you're the most boring person I've ever heard. I'd never want to go out for a drink with you. And you realize why they can do it and you can't.
Right.
We're built differently.
Yeah. No, I admire those individuals. Good for
I,
you.
I
That's real
genuinely
great.
admire them to the point
Yeah.
I'm envious of them, but it's like,
Yeah.
damn, every discipline you got came at the expense of your personality.
Oh my gosh. That's wild. Yeah, that's wild to kind of put that together too. You know,
Because I want to
I,
be that
I
guy. I
feel
want to
like,
be that woman. I do. But then
yeah.
I'm like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, wow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was a personal trainer.
Yeah.
When my wife passed away, I was doing personal training. I love health and fitness, and I love helping people with health and fitness. I found so much just purpose in it, and I loved helping other people. Um, but I also realized that as a personal trainer, I wasn't doing what I was telling people to do. you know, like I'm helping these people with their health, and they're seeing all these results and everything, which is so great. Um, but I wasn't even doing it because I just didn't have the I don't know. Mental health and of course physical health are hand in
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a lot of
Exactly.
cases, you'll hear like fitness helps mental health, but it's actually the opposite. Your mental health is what helps your physical fitness.
Yeah.
And it's just, I've always struggled with like trauma throughout my life and stuff, and I realized those things may have held me back a little bit from the things I was preaching to other people as my profession.
But I
um
sometimes find when people have like, I'll be coaching it and somebody will have a deep conversation with them. Oh, how did you learn this? It's like, well, because I have my moments of being batshit crazy and I've had to learn to navigate life through that.
yeah,
Because it turns out
yeah.
if I let the crazy out too much, I end up in trouble. So, do you know what I
Oh
mean?
no.
So I had to learn how to sort of keep it on a lead and
Yeah,
when to step into something, when to step away from something.
yeah.
So actually, all I'm teaching you is how I learned to control my mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. And gosh, again, there's so much to be said about the traumas that we've gone through and that self-awareness that we have.
Yeah,
I have conversations with people who have zero self-awareness of the things that are coming out of their mouths, the things that they're doing, their perceptions to other people or whatever it is. And I'm constantly evaluating myself and what I'm doing, what I'm thinking, you know, what my brain is doing because, I have depression. So it's like there are moments where my whole body shuts down and I am down and out and I have to let it happen.
yeah,
Like I know enough about myself, like to go, okay, you're feeling this way today. Maybe we don't put so much on your plate.
yeah.
Maybe just listen to your body and like understand what it's seeking in that moment. And, those are the things that kind of help me out of those moments.
I do sometimes wonder if, as a human race,
Mhm.
we've got to a point where our brain can't cope with the fact we don't do anything useful. Nothing. No,
Interesting.
no, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's well, to 10,000 years ago, we had shit you actually had to do to live.
Yeah.
Was today my stress was caused because I bought a new laptop and I didn't know how to set it up properly, and it caused me
Right.
like hours of stress because I knew I'd be talking to you, and I was just like today, and those 2-3 hours of stress it was causing me ignored the fact that my other laptop, which I've used all the time, was
Mhm.
underneath the laptop I was trying to set up.
Yeah.
So I just moved one laptop, opened it up. Oh look, everything's working.
And
I'm
here we
talking to you
are.
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? Our brain was never designed for that.
No.
Do you know?
No. And the things that we stress about these days, I mean, again, you know, I've learned over time what things deserve that energy of
Yeah.
stress
Mm.
and things that don't deserve that energy from me. You know, I'm very much also I've always been like a problem solver.
Yeah.
Very much a problem solver. Like when something happens, like I wanna fix it. Which might be the empath in me as well. um, but uh yeah, it's where you put your energy. So when things don't work, like I already have a low expectation of technology, right? I get a new piece of equipment, I know it's going to take me probably half a day to make sure it's up and running properly. But I try not to stress about it. It's not going to anger me because this is just
Yeah.
what happens. And then you have people who get upset when they spill a drink on the carpet, you
Yeah.
know and it's overwhelming for them to the point of almost just imploding. Whereas I can spill a drink on a carpet and just go, okay, well, now I got to clean that up. What do I need to clean that up? Or whatever the case is. Stressors are interesting because everybody's so different and we all process stressors so differently.
Oh, massively.
um yeah. And it's the brain is also kind of, when it comes to trauma, there's like a different level, right? Your brain matter actually changes,
Yeah.
like I have PTSD, which is very frustrating for me, which I've had to show myself compassion because my brain doesn't operate how it used to before my wife died. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. My memory is not any, it just, I don't have the memory I used to. I have to take up strategies to help remember things,
Yeah.
whether it is being really diligent about my phone calendar when I have appointments, or writing it down on a calendar, making a task list, making sure I don't forget things, or responding to things immediately because otherwise I'll forget. Like, otherwise, days are going to go by and I'm going to go, I forgot to respond to this person. So my brain has actually changed um, because of trauma, you know. Um, at first, it was really frustrating. It was a stressor for me to like not be able to function like I used to. But I've had to learn that compassion for myself also and go, this is what happens. It's okay. How do we move forward? Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Do you ever, when I'm talking to you and I'm listening to what you're saying, you occasionally mention this level that you have to go down to let emotions out, and it's almost like the tone of your voice and your accent, and you're up here. and then you come down, and you quickly, is at the point that you feel yourself there, you bounce away from it. It's like a
Mm,
deflection.
mm.
Do you actually ever recognize the courage it takes to allow yourself to get down there in the first place?
Um, I
Not
I
not
don't
your
think
coping strategies, not your
right.
strategies, not how you militarize it.
Right.
We're not in warfare. I mean,
Yeah.
as an individual person who's missing their wife, missing somebody they loved,
Yeah.
there's this painful place that is hard
Mm,
to recover from. Then make no mistake about it. But
yeah.
you have a lot of courage because you're constantly aware of it.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I it's one of those things in mental health. It needs to be talked about. And even
Yeah,
when
yeah,
it
but
is difficult,
I'm going to call you time out again because you just did it again. It's one of those
okay.
things in mental health. I'm not talking about mental health. I'm talking to you
Yeah. Okay,
because
fair.
no,
I
because
don't know.
Cause, no, so
Yeah.
that's cause what I mean is this like
Yeah.
you're incredibly expressive about
Mm,
everything.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? You've been no hold barred. The
mm,
highs and the lows, the love for your wife, where you even think that you're responsible and could have done more, haven't done enough. Where it's led you, where you are now, how you deal with it, and you do it with a tremendous smile. You
mm.
know, um, but your eyes are hurting. And it's kind of like I said, it's like a military operation. You know how to deal with battle. You
Yeah.
know, you're trained in. Okay, this is warfare. Fuck you. I know how to do this. I'm trained. Right.
Yeah, there was there was something that switched in me
Hmm.
when my wife passed because my entire life
Yeah.
having dissociative disorder,
Mhm.
right? I just, you just embrace the suck and you drive forward.
Yeah.
And that's how I've lived my entire life. I have set myself aside for everybody else. When somebody that I'm close to or somebody in a relationship has struggled, I set myself aside. That's what I've always done. When my wife passed, it was like a switch for me. And I don't know what it was. And I don't know, I don't know what it, why I feel the way I do now, you know?
Are you a hugger?
Um, I am now.
Okay.
I am now, like I see people and I actually, I'm usually the one to ask if
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody's a hugger now because human connection is so important.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what I have learned over the past year since starting my business too is human connection. We all crave it. We all need it to some degree. It's so powerful. The stories and connections that I have made with people just sharing their story when they see my brand and they know what it's about, they come to me and they just want to share their story and they ask about my story. And we have a moment with a stranger, a complete stranger,
Yeah.
where peeling back an onion that you would never talk about with somebody
Well,
before,
like you
you
and I.
know? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, I think, gosh, there's so much to the thought of why I feel that way now. You look at it as courage. I look at it as just kind of being who I am now. My new normal is connecting with other individuals and sharing that vulnerability because I feel like it is so important to hear.
Yeah.
I feel as though I have a message.
The original question is, do you recognize the courage?
No, I don't. I don't. I and I'm glad you're calling me out on that because I'm social media and I do social media and stuff and posts and everything. And I encourage other people to have
Yeah.
the courage. But I've never looked at it as me being courageous, if you will. And people tell me that, they're like, the courage that you have to tell your story and stuff. And I've never looked inward and recognized it as being that, I guess.
Yeah, because you and I were talking about our self-talk and how we look in the mirror, and it's difficult
Yeah.
sometimes to
Mm-hmm.
recognize that. See, it's the misconception with courage and bravery
Mhm.
is, and it's a cliche. I appreciate it's a cliche, but often cliches have much deeper meaning if we just give them 30 seconds of thought. Is that,
Mhm.
everyone will talk about, bravery and courage isn't doing something you're not afraid of. It's when you
Right.
face what you fear and
Yeah.
step into it and see where the journey takes you. It's when you do
Mhm.
the things that you want to step away from. It's where
Yeah.
courage, that is courageous. That's the definition of courage. It's to be afraid and say, well, I'm doing it anyway. And lots of things that you've said, like the way you tried to problem solve when you first realized your wife was having difficulties. You didn't,
Yeah.
you did that because, funnily enough, what you didn't do is sweep it under the carpet, even though you actually suggested you did. You said at the beginning
Mhm.
you didn't take it seriously enough. But you took it
Mhm.
so seriously, you probably studied every single book the library had, and then listened to everybody. So you used the tools and resources you knew you had that were effective for you to do
Yeah.
everything you could. It takes courage because you were taking it seriously and you knew potential outcome, which unfortunately is what happened. But
Mhm.
you faced that head on, and that must have been frightening. And then even after that, you've digested it, meditated on it, probably done therapy on it, beat 7 bags of shit out of dumbbells on it, run down the road with your headphones in for a 10 mile, you know, everything known under the sun that could be done, um,
Yeah.
to stay on top of it. Well,
Yeah.
that's kind of facing courage every single day of your life
Yeah. I appreciate you saying that.
as you deflect it.
Right. um,
That little pause and look away. Okay. Yeah. No, I just it's
it's
just
it's
interesting that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, and I do apologise. It's
no,
just
you're okay.
it's interesting how resolute and compassionate you have been to help other people,
Mhm.
and how much you are attempting to really go to the ends of the earth. To do, I mean, to really try and prevent this happening to somebody else. But
Yeah.
you kind of, if I was going to be sort of like blunt about it, you really need to give yourself a fucking break. You're doing great.
Thank you. um, yeah, I it's so hard to explain like the vision that you're giving me as you're telling me these things. Because the vision of myself is just I am living my life now the best way that I can.
Yeah.
I feel like
So
I have a purpose now, and I know that there's different elements of me taking helping others, but also helping myself. And there's it's so overly complicated because
I know it's
I
actually
have
very
this.
simple. You just honestly have the wrong narrative. So
Yeah.
if I said to you, I met this woman on a podcast. Unfortunately, I can't meet her in person because she's a hugger and I'm a hugger. Right. So, but she's been wonderful conversation, has been incredibly open, been very truthful, has discussed the pain, how she tried to help, been very open about her love and affection for another human being, right? The problems it has caused and how she has done everything she can to tackle it, has set up an enterprise to help other people tackle it. Would that not be the definition of an incredibly inspiring person?
I, yeah, no, I agree.
That's you, by the way. I was talking about in case you didn't work that one out.
Yeah, yeah, I am deflecting.
No, no, it's sometimes people just need to tell. Do you know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
this is what I was saying to the
yeah,
beginning. Like, it's really easy for another person to tell you how proud they are and how amazed
yeah,
they are and how inspired they are by what you're doing. But we
yeah,
really, as individuals, struggle so much.
yeah,
Because could you just imagine if you just let a glimmer of happiness into your heart?
yeah,
You,
yeah. I still have a lot of work to do from a healing perspective for sure, and being able to see that. And I think that's what's gotten me to the point of where I'm at. And my mission in life is those affirmations that I have gotten from other people,
Yeah.
but I also know that I need to see that within myself.
It's
That's
not the
something that,
it's not the end of the journey. It's just
yeah.
in terms of, like, say, an energy flow. We can get all sort of
Mhm.
spiritual about it. There's an amazing energy that comes,
Mhm.
right? But unfortunately, the motivation and the place it comes from is from heartache. It's
Yeah.
from missing that one soul connection that
Yeah.
was everything that made me feel complete. And it's kind of like, the more you embrace it, the bigger the hole feels. And it's
Hmm.
the more obvious it's there. And it's
Yeah.
not that it will never be replaced. It's actually, I don't know if I ever want to be replaced. And maybe what I'll do is learn to be comfortable with the loneliness that's always there. It's like
Yeah.
a voice that never gets answered.
Mhm.
And even though it's kind of a silent space, that silence, ironically, is loud. And if I'm really, really busy, I can keep the volume down a little bit, because the moment I
Yeah.
stop, it's screaming at me. And
Hmm.
it's a constant reminder of what was, and
Yeah.
what cannot be again. Um, and like with any of these things, we struggle because, as much as we convince ourselves we know the truth is, although there was nothing we could do about it, it was in a
Mhm.
big sense avoidable. Um, but you've taken all of that and somehow turned it into a positive.
Yeah.
And you know, I just think it's an incredible thing. And maybe one day, if you can sit there, watch a sunset, and think, yeah, do you know what? Maybe I'm a pretty good person. I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
No, you're right.
I don't have to define my every moment as a trauma, as a therapy, as a because actually you probably are the reason that so many other people, currently and moving forward, won't take their lives, and will actually embrace the person they love, will do the work, will do the therapy. You are going to help lots of people. You can't
Yeah.
not. You're too. There's just something about you that's too much there.
I appreciate that. And that's obviously my hope. And, along this journey this past year, you know, in my old normal would have done anything and everything to avoid mental health discussions and vulnerability, and just, you know, done what I normally dissociate typically. And a big part of my healing journey has been talking about it. And every event that I do, every podcast that I do, it forces me into talking about it. And there's just so much healing in that, um, for myself. And I know other people too. I know, because I've heard from them personally,
Yeah,
how much it has helped them and inspired them to either get help or share their own story, or just to not feel alone. I think a lot of these cases, people just don't want to feel alone. And that's something that that's one huge reason why I share my story to others as well, because there are other people out there struggling. They don't know how to navigate it. They don't know if they can talk about it because it's so taboo. In the mental health piece, the stigma surrounding mental health, there's just all of those things involved. Um, and people they reach out to me, and it does make me feel good. It does, it makes me feel like I'm doing the right thing with my life. And it really keeps me going, on a personal level. Um, it's hard to give myself compliments though.
yeah, yeah. But
um,
I think you might at least reflect on some of the positive things you're doing.
yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things that, like you and I, when I reached out to you, I explained, that there was, for different reasons, I was familiar with the subject,
Mhm.
and contemplated taking my own life once. And
Mhm.
mine's a completely different story in that sense, because I'd got to the point where I was living in London. I just basically had enough of living. And I remember having a conversation with a friend about this not that many years ago. And he's a very good friend, somebody I used to hang out with in London. And even though we haven't seen each other for a decade, we pretty much still message each other every day, like little
Yeah.
schoolboys sending each other memes on farting or something. And um, hardly high intellect stuff, And he was listening to something I'd said, and he was just like, I don't remember you being like that at all. He said, we used to go out party, we used to work together, we used to drink. I was like, I'm not going to talk to you about that. Because the internet didn't exist. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Um, and for me, I was basically, like, to shorten the story a little bit, I was sitting on a bench at Earl's Court Tube Station in London, contemplating which train to step in front of. And there was just this strange moment. And it wasn't like a big, massive thing. It was just something that suddenly is like, "No, David, that's not who you are." And I was just like, "Oh no, I'm not, am I?" And that was it. I then got on the train and went home. And it was
Wow.
that simple. The
Yeah.
problem was I'd invested so much time in hating who I was. I
Hmm.
didn't like who I was. I didn't love that person. The person that was left who didn't kill himself was
Hmm.
absolutely disgusted to his core who he was. And
Yeah.
it didn't make my life simpler. My life got a lot worse. I ended up in trouble with the law. I ended up bankrupt because I was
Jeez.
just one long bad decision, bad choice, bad lifestyle because I
Hmm.
hadn't killed myself. And I'm not trying to, do you know what I mean? What it gave me was a massive insight into, oh shit, this is how serious it gets. And then I had to
Yeah.
develop these tools to find a way out of it. Um, and and again, that took a long time. And I would say the biggest obstacle was actually learning how to block out the voices of other people. It's
Hmm.
like, do you know what? I don't care what you think. This
Yeah.
is what I'm interested in. This is what I want to do. Because
Yeah.
it was along that road I actually started kind of discovering this true person of who I was and what I wanted to do in my life, and that actually it's okay to suddenly decide I don't want to do something. Like I can
Yeah.
spend 3 years doing some course to improve my education, and then, like, yeah, no, I don't want to do that anymore. If you just
Yeah.
qualified, you could go and get a job doing that. Yeah, but I'm bored now. I want to go and learn something else, and that's fine.
Right.
That
Yeah.
that's absolutely fine. And I can change the way I think about anything. And if I don't want people in my friendship circles anymore because I'm just finding it too depressing, too toxic, yeah, do you know
Yeah.
what? I'm just going to pull away from it, and I'm not going to explain myself anymore. I just,
Yeah.
I would recommend somebody getting a dog because I've got a dog and that's brilliant. um,
Yeah. I love all of that because that's kind of the journey that my mind has gone through
mm,
since my wife died. Soon right after she died, I felt worthless. I didn't want to move forward. When my community asked me what I needed, I told them I didn't want to be alone, because my brain was just ripping me apart, you
mm,
know, having dealt with trauma and abandonment and all the things, my entire life. And then this one thing, like,
yeah,
absolutely just ripped me to my core. Like, I didn't want to, like, move forward.
and it's difficult,
So
isn't it?
I've,
Because that one thing suddenly,
mhm,
now I belong. And
yeah.
do you know what I mean? And I don't mean it in the ownership sense, but it's like now I belong to somebody else and they belong to me. We are now
Yeah.
together. We're a unit. We're a partnership. We are this thing that is greater than just me as an individual.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I can honestly say, like, I have seen what I have done over the past year. I have seen what I have done, and I love myself more than I ever have.
Yeah.
Um, I love who I am now, because of these strides that I have taken. I love, just, I love who I am now. And that's something I never would have said before. And that's something I do carry with me, um, every day.
So what's next?
Um, this year, 2024 has been about sharing my story, and that's what I've started doing in January. Really, I've done a few podcasts, I've done all the things. What's next for me is just continuing to get my message out there. When you talk about big picture and like what I would love to do 5 to 10 years from now, it's mental health reform in the US. We have a lot of work to do in our mental health care industry, and I would love to be at the front of that mission of reforming it to be able to provide more resources and more help to people who need it. So that's in the future, but for now, it's helping people at a human level. At our level, we need so much help. Um, um, Being able to share, how people can reach out or where to reach out and resources and what it is that they need. And if they need a human connection, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't think it's okay. So just sharing my message and continuing to make those connections. There's so much power in that at this level.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm always I have had a friend. You can see him up. Well, you can't really because the light's reflecting on him. They're photographing. He didn't kill himself, but he kind of drunk himself to death. And
Hmm.
but he was one of my oldest and closest friends, and we shared a flat together when I was in London and stuff like that. And he always had a difficulty with prescription drugs, and like from the doctor and stuff like that, and drinking. And that he only really had two friends, me and his best friend from school, Rupert. And a couple of years ago, Rupert found him dead, and I went round, and the police were there, and I identified the body and stuff. Um,
Hmm.
but he'd been to rehab a couple of times. Rupert had been to rehab. He obviously knew about my story and stuff like that. I've known him since I was 15. So it's like, 30, like I'm 49 now. So yeah, so it was 30 odd years. And so you can imagine over the years the conversations we'd had about the darkness and the demons.
Hmm.
And I remember him telling me once, and I found it very interesting because, in a sense, I'm an avoider. Um, I know what works for me and what doesn't. So I just avoid the things that don't work. I can't navigate in that sense. Um, I have friends that can, oh yeah, just one is fine. It's like, no, I can't do that. Um, I'm all in or I'm not at all. So I'm very difficult to go out for a cat. I can not drink for 6 months, not a problem. But if I'm going out for a drink, I'm having a drink.
Yeah. I,
Yeah,
I get that. I've been sober for 3.5 years for a reason.
yeah, yeah. And I then might not drink for 2 years. You know,
Yeah.
the thing that astounded me with my friend Nick is that when he died, his brother lives in Norway. So me and Rupert said we'll clear out the house. We'll clear it up and stuff like that, and make sure it's for when you come over and stuff. 'Cause there's not much to do. We didn't realise he was still an alcoholic in the sense that
Oh,
he was still drinking because
yeah.
and the reason it was weird was because Rupert had his own problems with addiction over the years and had been in rehab and stuff. Nick was very aware of my own personal problems that I'd combated over the years. We all used to talk about it openly, with zero judgment. We'd all been actually in it. It was, I think it was Rupert's dad that originally got Nick into rehab once. So do you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's just like it's the
Yeah.
common, it's just like saying, "Do you want a cup of tea?" It was just, and so he and I were both surprised that he was drinking as much as he was, just because he hadn't said anything. And
Yeah.
it's not like me and Rupert weren't visiting him. And I had always had a rule with Nick that if he was drunk, then okay, mate, I'm gonna split because I'm not dealing with you in this sort of state. So
Mhm.
it wasn't an open secret, it wasn't a secret. It was just general discussion. If I was due to go round there, he might even message me and say, "I've had a few drinks, don't come round." Yeah, yeah, no worries. I'll
Yeah.
catch up. I'll catch up with you on Saturday or something. Um, so and the reason Rupert and I both found it really surprising is because how open we always were with our conversations. And I remember
Yeah.
Nick once talking to me about the demons when he was sober,
Mhm.
and he said just that one drink. He said, "And my life is good." He said he wasn't an unhappy alcoholic. He was unhappy sober. He said
Mm.
when he was drinking, he said, and Nick like was hyper intelligent. He, like a stupid, ridiculous high IQ, and I do think that was half his problem. He was just too smart for somebody that didn't have a purpose and didn't have an
Yeah.
interest. He spoke like 3 languages, knew the medical encyclopedia. He'd go down and see the doctor and diagnose himself to the doctor and what medication he needed and where the doctor could get it from. Do you know what I mean? He was like crazy, ridiculous, stupid. Um,
Yeah.
and but he was saying that he loved his demons. It was the only time he felt happy was
Mm.
that to everyone else when he was drunk it was chaos, but to him it was calm. It was a calming storm. But the
Wow.
storm was at full flow when he was sober and had to just
Mm.
be in the world. And he's just like, no, but do you know what I mean? And it was just really because
Yeah.
he would drink and take barbiturates and stuff like that, and uppers and
Mm.
downers, and go on like a 2 week crazy ride, but loved
Wow.
it, like loved it. And he said it was the only time he felt at peace. And I always just
Yeah.
remember how strange that was because I was, and this is the reason I'm trying to explain myself is because I always used to try and talk to him from the perspective of I'm helping him battle his demons. I didn't really realize his demon was being sober.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of thing that you and I will seek because it
Mhm.
means we can keep control and stay in
Yeah.
control. That's the very thing that was his demon,
Mm.
and his sanctuary was the chaos of being off his head. And
Wow. Yeah. I get kind of that piece of it in terms of,
yeah,
you know, I I, I used to drink. And I had to start learning how to navigate my brain,
yeah,
right?
yeah. No,
And
because I think the problem is I think one of the things that's difficult is like you're saying, people don't have these conversations, and I know for
Mhm.
definite, which is one of the reasons I like doing this, is if somebody had
Mhm.
met me in my late 20s, or if I was able to listen to this type of conversation in my late 20s, because
Mhm.
podcasting wasn't a thing, the internet wasn't really a thing, YouTube was
Yeah.
just cats and dogs doing stupid things. Is people weren't having these conversations about their
Mhm.
and I'm not even 100% certain anymore if it's a mental health issue. It's just, no, people don't teach you how to navigate life because
Yeah.
life isn't what it was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Life today is unrecognizable from any other point in time. And
Yeah.
it's just like our brains are not set up for it. And unless people like you and I have a dialogue, like like you and I are literally laughing about the very things that nearly can tip us over the edge. Do you know what I mean? We're like, yeah, do you know what? I could be doing out like a massacre tomorrow because I'm kind of like, touchy feely today. and and it's just like, I'm not, but it's just in case anyone's worried.
Okay. Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? But our brains go through this weird process of we're up or we're down, and
Mhm.
it's like I don't know. It's like trying to navigate an asteroid field while you're strapped into a roller coaster. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a great view, and other times you're clinging on for dear life. And
Yeah.
but
And that
people talk about
that's
it
the
like solutions, and I was like, no, you've not stepped inside my head, mate.
yeah. No, and that's it's difficult. It's difficult on
Mm,
it from the moment you wake, I mean, to the time you go to sleep, just especially when you just have an overactive brain, like I have to take sleep meds now.
yeah,
I never wanted to be on meds ever in my life, and I have to be on sleep meds in order for my brain to shut off,
yeah.
you
I was
know?
on, yeah, I was on them for a few years. I don't take them now, but I was on them for a few years.
Yeah.
Um,
It is hard to navigate the things that we have to navigate these days. It's like I had a rough morning this morning because, I'm a one person show with my small business and I have a nonprofit. I have a bunch of things happening over the next month, and like I have such a long to do. My brain's just going with what my to do list
yeah,
is, and it's like my brain is off in 20 different channels almost a lot of times. And to figure out how to navigate that can be difficult,
yeah,
you know like some days, I mean, I just have to sit and like shut off. I watch trash TV sometimes, and that's just to get my brain just to shut off
no,
even for
I
10
laugh because
minutes.
there's times when there's certain things I watch on TV.
Yeah.
I have a terrible habit of watching things I've seen 100 times, but
Oh, me too.
it relaxes me. I
Yeah.
can't explain it. You know,
Nope, I am the exact same way. I will watch, and some of that, like I would say 20% of me rewatching things is because I don't know what's going to trigger me and like my PTSD, and like
mm,
a movie that I don't know, or a song or whatever. Like I don't, so I watch. There's so much comfort in watching things like
yeah,
over and over. And I meet people that are like, no, I don't watch things over. I've already seen that. And I'm like, what do you mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah, no,
I have watched
yeah.
the
One of
same
my best
movies
friends is
like a
like that.
hundred
Yeah,
times.
one of my
Yeah.
best friends is like, it's just like, have you seen this film? It's like, yeah, yeah. Oh, well, we won't watch it. It's like, no, I can watch it again. Well, when did you last see it?
Yeah.
3 days ago. I watched it at the cinema.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how can you watch it again? Because I can, and I can watch
Yeah.
it again next week.
Yep.
You know, if you want, when the film's finished, you can start it again. I'll be quite comfortable watching it all over again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, that's funny. Um,
It is, but and I could be the same. I'm not a massive music person.
mhm.
There's and my taste is quite eclectic. It's one day,
Mhm.
1 minute can be. I was listening to Nas earlier, and then yesterday I was listening to classical music. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
Yeah.
every now and again, particular sound or song will trigger something. It'll be an
Mhm.
emotion, and I'll
Mhm.
just put my headphones on and just put it on repeat for the next 6 hours and not move.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's just like I don't know whether it's a reset, a coping mechanism. I don't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, but it takes me to somewhere where I don't know the world exists, and that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I need to get better at. I am very avoidant, and like any slow song now I can't listen to.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Anything
I
so
get that.
remotely slow. Or any kind of rock music that I used to listen to that has even the darkest of lyrics, just a little bit dark. Like I can't listen to those things anymore. So I have to listen to like upbeat stuff. Otherwise, I will find myself um, I'll have a meltdown. That's just
Yeah,
it. Like I'll find myself in a place that in that moment, like, especially if I'm working, I can't be in that place when I'm working, but I try to reserve it for a later time.
yeah,
Like I'm feeling those things. This is trying to take me to a place, but then there's certain strategies where you talk to your parts, like your sad parts or your angry parts or whatever it is that you're feeling. And if you don't have time in that moment to feel it, then you make sure you reserve that time later.
yeah. I write notes,
So, uh,
and then I'll go
yeah,
meditate on those notes 8 hours later.
there you go. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And I'll repeat the. So I do the opposite to the. If I find something triggers or causes a reaction, a physical reaction, where I feel like
Hmm.
something tense up or a knot. Um, I used to be really kind of like practice stoicism and just be calm, be peace, show it love, give love. And I just found none of that worked for me. I just found it all to be a load of bollocks. And actually, what I have to
Yeah.
do is actually literally embrace what's on my mind. And if it's like I hate
Yeah.
that person, I just do the affirmation that I hate that person, and that seems to release it. Because every spiritual
Yeah.
guru will tell you to give love and forgiveness, and that's never worked for me. And sometimes and I know that everyone is, but then this is what I'm saying is I think people have to figure out what part of the path works for them. Where do they need to put their
Yeah.
feet down to walk their path? Is I
Yeah.
found that if I lean into the thing that made me angry or upset or hate, rather than deny it,
Mhm.
actually I find that if I, no, I'm really angry because you betrayed me, because you did this, because you did that, you know, you know, and I actually have that dialogue in my head as if I was just, you know what, screw your feelings. I'm going to let you know everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
that releases it for me.
Yeah.
It's
No, I agree. And I think you're absolutely right. I wish people were okay with how they felt sometimes,
yeah,
and embrace you're allowed to have feelings.
yeah.
If somebody does you wrong, you don't have to forgive that person if you don't want to.
No,
Like you're allowed to be angry or sad or frustrated or whatever.
yeah,
Absolutely embrace it, recognize it, maybe even try to dive a little bit deeper and understand why or what is making you feel that. What other, your belief system, your values, or something that triggers extreme emotion at times.
yeah.
I wish people would, dive a little bit deeper into the emotions that they're feeling.
Because I can't remember where I read it, and it would have been years and years ago. But like through Zen or through peacefulness is acknowledging all your parts, not focusing on not focusing on the peaceful part, because you can't have good weather if you've never experienced bad weather. It's
Yeah.
recognizing all of your parts. And when
Hmm.
you've got something that's really screaming inside of you because something has
Yeah.
pissed you off, or someone has pissed you off, or you've lost something that you're going to crave for, no, that part of it, I'm about to say it needs to be felt, but that's not right. It's
Validated.
you need to know, yeah, but you need to
Yeah.
know it. You need to
Hmm.
know all of its parts and what it means and
Yeah.
why it's important and why it's purposeful for you. Because
Yeah.
the grief, like with your wife, is
Hmm.
it's more than just how you feel. It's how it happened to you. It's what that person did for you. It's the impact that person had, and the purpose of that. What was the meaning? Why was it able to happen? And how did it happen to such an intensity
Hmm.
that he, do you know what the best thing about that is? When you can't explain it.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
whenever you can actually put something into words, it demonstrates its
Yeah.
limitation.
Yeah. Yeah. I I feel that there's a lot of times I just uh yeah, you don't know how to express
Yeah, because
the depth of something, and that's
yeah,
okay.
because the word sorry is two syllables and four letters, but to experience an apology is greater than the word,
Yeah.
and love is the same.
Yeah. Hmm. I like that. It's true.
And that's probably a good place to stop. Thank you very much for your time. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. And there you have it. That was a very deep, very heartfelt conversation. And I hope, if nothing else, people will understand from that even when we see how amazing, how talented, and how inspiring, and just how loving somebody is, when they're in a place where they're grieving and recovering from pain, it's really hard to see that in yourself, and that hurts. So, as always, please, wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever you believe in, take care of yourself and try and be kind to yourself above all else. Thank you. That's it.